All right, welcome. Thank you for coming today. My name is Bob Silva. I'm the Director of Technology for Salem Keizer Public Schools, and hopefully you're in the right session because I did change it about 3 weeks ago. It was going to be a SCCM OMS style Microsoft product suite, but I changed it over to documentation because we found a new product called IT Glue, which, so this is kind of a product demo. But let me ask a question. Who has solved their documentation problems? Raise a hand. Looking at the size of the room and the number of attendees, assuming you are in the right session, it's a challenge, right? I haven't figured it out. My team hasn't figured it out. In Hermiston, we kind of figured it out, but it still wasn't perfect. There was not anywhere near 100% documentation of our infrastructure. Now, in a small school district, there's maybe a little more risk involved because I'm sure as soon as I left, I took a lot of the knowledge with me because I built that pretty much from the ground up over the last 6 years that I was there. Salem Keizer, a little bit different in that there's more people to spread that knowledge across, but when you get somebody like me as your director that does get involved in the infrastructure and does help support it and stuff, it can be a little frustrating to constantly have to ask, where's this information? Where's that information? Where's the documentation that goes with that? And right now, it's usually on a file server in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, or in most cases, probably people's heads. So I know Kennewick School District does generally a pretty good job with documentation using OneNote because Ron gave a session last year or the year before, last year, on that. And I started going down that path. We are a SharePoint district, and I started creating a SharePoint infrastructure to solve some of the documentation challenges. So I'm going to make this an interactive session. What are some of the top documentation items that most districts probably struggle with? Okay, true? Passwords?
Getting so much thrown up there that you can't keep it organized and you can't find it.
Okay, so I'm going to jump on that for a second. Remember, if you document it, you have to what? You have to maintain it. If you don't maintain it, don't document it. So when you start looking at documenting your computer assets, you have to make that decision. Do I want to maintain that? And for Salem Keizer, do I want to maintain 14,000 items? No. I already have systems. I have Active Directory. I have SCCM. I already have systems that provide sufficient documentation for that. So we would not make the decision to document those assets separately from the operational systems because there's no way we'd be able to maintain the information. What are some of the other things? I haven't heard it yet. Passwords was one. Licenses. That can be a challenge. Where's our networking guys?
IP address.
Thank you. Probably number one thing, or maybe I just have OCD on that, but if you don't know every single IP address that you have assigned out there on your network, nowadays it starts to become a security issue. So as you start looking through your logs and needing to trace something down, a lot of times in a security event, you don't have time to start using all your little neat networking tricks to find out what is that device. You should be able to, figure it out pretty fast based on your documentation. So, and again, maybe that's just an OCD of mine. What are some of the different systems people are using? Just shout them out. I know we got OneNote, SharePoint, Wiki, huh? Excel, Google Docs is going to be a popular one. Access database. What was that? Rack tables? Oh. What are some of the different software programs? We already heard some of them. Google Docs, Visio, right? OneNote is convenient because it's in the cloud. You can store an offline cache of it. Do you want to mix your passwords and your documentation? Generally, no. But then where do you put your passwords? I know KeyPass. For a smaller district, that probably works well. Yeah, like I said, the small password systems for a smaller district where there's only a few of you, it probably works well. When you have 79, it doesn't work so well because you can't provide full access to all the system passwords across that big a staff. Anybody from Kent School District in here? 1 or 2, 3? All right, what do you guys use? I already know the answer, but.
Yes.
For your password management.
Yes.
Do you, okay, so that didn't work out well. Do you still use Thycotic secret server for your password management?
Not that I'm aware of.
No? Okay. So at some point in the past, because Thycotic. So Thycotic makes it's a cloud-based service, but it can also be on-prem, and we went with the on-prem because we want our passwords secured locally. I'm not that trusting of cloud providers yet, but Thycotic makes a system called Secret Server, and it's pretty much a password management database on steroids. So if you haven't looked at it, and I would invite you to look at it, it's actually a very robust product. And what so the steroids are, it can actually do password management for you. So it can reach out to your switches and manage those passwords and change them on a regular basis. Same thing with your Windows Server and your service accounts. It can manage all of those passwords for you. So it's just an added layer of security. It's not a cheap product, but it worked well for us because when I got there, we had 3 or 4 different systems. Each team kind of brought up their own password management solution. So it was like, well, that's not going to work. So we found one product that met the needs where we could say, okay, so our networking team has access to these passwords, and our support team has access to these passwords, and my front office has access to these passwords and stuff like that. So it's a very, very flexible product. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I started to build in SharePoint, and I'd try to load it up, but it'd probably take forever. All the different tables, so IP addresses and printers and assets, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But what was missing in SharePoint was that relation, that interconnection. So an IP by itself is nothing. It's attached to something, right? So there's a relationship there. Same thing with, let's say you had a chassis switch. So you got the chassis, that's its own item. You got some blades in it, those are their own items. Maybe you have some configurations attached to those blades. So documentation is all about those relationships and the connections between the different documentation items. So finally I got fed up with SharePoint because it couldn't do it efficiently so that I could use it, but asking 79 of my staff members to figure out how to use the system wasn't going to be successful because it was kind of kludgy, and while I understood it, I didn't want to make everybody else try to figure out how to use that system. So I started searching online. Surprisingly, with it being such a big problem, if you look at the size of the room and the number of people, there's only like 5 or 6 products out there. So if any of you are a developer and want to make it rich, it's a need. It took probably 2 or 3 days to find just the list of products. There are none for K-12. There are none that are what I would call enterprise class products. But eventually I ran across this one called IT Glue. Not necessarily the best name, not necessarily the best product. It's a relatively new product and maturing very rapidly, and that's why I went ahead and invested in it, because I can see the potential of what it will be in a year or two, and it meets our needs right now. So IT Glue, it's a Canadian company, don't hold that against them. It's not Ontario, so it's Vancouver, BC. And I guess you have to be Canadian to really understand that. But anyways, I have a Canadian son. Figure out that. So I ran across this, and like I said, I signed up for a demo, started researching online, but it's it's built for the MSP market. Who knows what MSP is?
Managed service provider.
Right. Who knew that before today? Only a few hands. I didn't know it. I'm like, what the hell is MSP? Never heard of MSP, and I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. Never heard of MSP. But yes, it's managed service provider, so it's small IT consulting shops. And a lot of the integrations that you'll see in this, you won't see SCCM, you won't see Novell, you won't see any of these bigger enterprise class integration products. You see the smaller MSP, ConnectWise, Automate. So if you're looking for integration, you're not going to find it. But what they are doing is building an API. So using a REST API so that you can do your own integrations if you have the programming skill set on your team. So I'm going to go ahead and start demoing now. If you have questions, I'm going to try to keep it interactive because this is pretty much, you can see I don't have a ton of information inserted into here yet, and it's not a production system. But I'll go through and try to explain for you why I think this can be a solution for K-12, and we'll just go from there. So, So since this is a MSP product, it can support multiple organizations. So if you think of yourself as a small contractor, you have a lot of clients, so it's built around that model. In our case, we only need one client, and that's Salem-Keizer Public Schools. So I'm going to go into my organization. So you can see, not a production system. About enough accounts to fit all my staff into here, but didn't want to start putting live data into it because then I want to be able to give a live demo for you guys. So I've held it off for about a month. And we're also defining the what of how to document our infrastructure. So, and even when you define the what, you still have to define all the different attributes of the what. And different people are going to want to track different information. And that's really where this tool starts to shine, and I'll show you why. So at its core is a CMDB. Who can tell the audience what a CMDB system is? Who's an ITIL expert?
Change management database.
Okay, so what's the purpose of it? And it's not change management, configuration. So what's the purpose of a configuration management database? Basically, it's to track your configurations and the changes that occur over time. So at its core, you have configurations. And this is basically all of your assets. Generally, those assets are on the network, and that's one of the reasons you're documenting it, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a document camera. It can be the projectors in your classroom, the smart boards. I mean, it can be whatever you want it to be, and on these, you can actually import them in mass. So you can see here in the configurations, I'm assuming you can see, maybe you can't in the back. Do I need to zoom it in a little? In the back? Yeah? No? All right. We'll see what we can do here. Whoa. How's that?
It's mobile friendly.
It actually is responsive. Come on. Is that a little bit better? All right. So with configuration, again, there's a few attributes, and you'll hear me say that over and over and over because that's what documentation is about. So you have a type, status. Obviously, most things have a name, IP address, serial number, expires. So as I go through this product, I'm going to tell you the good things and the not so good things. So the configurations are set in stone. You cannot modify the different attributes on your configurations. So that's something to keep in mind, is they are what they are. So if we go to create a new configuration, the fields that they provide are the fields that are available. So name, type, expiration date, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Some of the purchasing information. So if you're purchasing E-rate information, that's one of the things that, according to the E-rate rules, you're supposed to be tracking. Location as far as where it's at. And then device information. So this is obviously IP specific, but it's not required information to install an IP address. Security, we'll cover that in a little bit. So these are the configurations. Where the power comes in with your configurations, if we go into one, is if you look over on the right-hand side, you'll see a few things. One, it can do password management. You would have to make your own decision if you trust all of your passwords with this third-party hosted provider in Canada. Here's where the power comes in, the related items. This is how you build those relationships that I talked about. Inside of IT Glue, you can relate to anything. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's something in the system, you can create a relationship between the two items, and it's self-referential. So as soon as you create the relationship one way, if you went to the other item, you'll see the relationship back automatically. So it works. So let's take this Epson Powerlight. So let's say we were documenting our classrooms, for instance. Maybe that's a configuration item that we want to document. So we could relate this projector, who is in Pringle Elementary, room 15. So you can see that in our naming scheme. We could then add a related item and start typing, Pringle Elementary, classroom, however you named it. You can start typing in and you can create that association with it. So that starts to become really powerful as your documentation grows and grows and grows. So that's kind of configurations. It's pretty simple. It doesn't contain a lot of information. But then there's a lot of supporting items. So contacts, for instance. Now that can be contacts, that can be your staff, that can be your vendors, staff in your whole school district. It doesn't matter. You can import. They're just contact items. Somebody mentioned licensing being a challenge. So this actually is kind of live data here. So licensing can be tracked. Locations. So I was able to import all of my schools as well as some of my vendors and their companies and addresses. So sites that's a customization that I made. Your vendors. So we'll look at that here in a second. So that's kind of the top part. Here's where it starts to get powerful. So in the, I'm assuming it's visible. I should always check, I guess, especially since I'm zoomed in. So one of the reasons why SharePoint OneNote is good is because you can define the documentation format that you want. And for documentation, you really do need to be able to define the different attributes and not just have one way to document everything. It's not going to be very good documentation. So there's structured data and there's unstructured data. So, how to install SQL Server. That's obviously unstructured information. It's probably just a Word document, just some steps in a document. Whereas, IP addresses, that's structured information. So, one row per IP address, and then some relationships or associations to, okay, what is using that IP address. So in this case, the bottom half of this list here are called flexible assets within the system. So the top part are called configuration assets. The bottom part are flexible because they are what you decide them to be. The ones that the majority of the ones you see here are what's built into the product. You just go in and say, put these live, and it puts out some base template flexible assets for you. So, describe your Active Directory, your backup process, Dhcp Scopes, I created that, tracking your domains. And it's got some interesting integrations, and all you have to do is put in your domain. It'll go out and read the DNS servers out there and pull that information from the registrar back into the application. This is one that I created, so we have our EES agreements, and the list goes on to the bottom. By the time we actually have this in production, the majority of this probably won't be here. It'll be something different because, again, this is built by a small IT consulting firm to provide a solution for small IT. But since these are flexible assets, it can be whatever you need it to be. And that's where, for me, that's what really brought the power in. That's also why I liked SharePoint as an initial solution, because I can go in, create a custom list, add whatever attributes I wanted to be able to track for those assets, and track those individual attributes. So let's look at, I don't think I have any private information in here. So when you first go in, it just gives you a view of it. So Active Directory, what are some of the attributes that you need to track with Active Directory? Obviously, what's the forest name? What's the net and BIOS name of the domain? Who are your domain controllers? So this section right here is a lookup or a inline association. So it's very similar to the related items section, but this is actually done inline as an attribute. So I have more domain controllers than this, but just for demo purposes, I just imported one into the configuration asset. And then for my Active Directory, I define this as a configuration lookup. So it looks up into the configuration items and then tags them and associates them with this. If I was to go into DTC DC1, I'll see that as a Active Directory. I'll see it as a related item on the domain controller. So again, it's building those relationships for you. And if you've used SharePoint, you know you can do lookups, but you have to do it on both sides. So just because you put it on one side doesn't mean that the other side knows it's being looked up. And that was one of the roadblocks that I ran into in creating it with SharePoint. I had my IP addresses and my server list, and then to associate both of them, it was a chicken and egg problem. I could create the server, but I couldn't add the IP address in the lookup, so I had to go create the IP address. Then I could associate the server to the IP, but then I had to go back to the server to associate the IP to the server. See how that doesn't work? This manages all of that for you.
Is this live interactive, or is this a snapshot in time, or does it update?
Define live interactive.
If you add a domain controller, is it going to find you've added a domain controller?
Okay. So let me tell you where I see the product heading and how I would solve that. So again, I come from a programming background, so I may think differently about what the opportunities are available to me. So the REST API currently, come on, okay. So the REST API currently allows you to manage this stuff up here. So that's how I imported all of my locations. I just built a quick PowerShell script to read a CSV file and use the REST API to throw them up into here. It's quick and easy. I think I spent less than 20 minutes reading the documentation, creating the PowerShell, and then throwing it all up there. This part down here is coming. So let me tell you what I did to work around that, and I can maybe even give you a live demo. So I told you that I was working on it in SharePoint. So hopefully this loads and it's going to want me to log in. So while I was working on the SharePoint thing, I started looking for resources. You know, what are some ideas out there? What are some products that are trying to do what I'm trying to do? So, and that's when I first ran around across IT Glue. At that time, I was just using it as a resource to inform my work that I was building in SharePoint. I wasn't looking for a product at that point because I was building the solution in SharePoint. Come on. This is the challenge with doing live demos at ACPE. Now I just got to figure out where the hell I put it. It's actually in my groups, isn't it? But, so you just heard me, well, I can't show you, but you just heard me talk about the domain capability. So down here, you just put in the domain name, and then the IT Glue system goes out and searches. I was like, man, that's a pretty cool thing. What could I do with that within SharePoint? So, all right. So this is a perfect example. So here I'm in my documentation I was building up into SharePoint. Dhcp Scopes is one of the things that I've done in the past. In Hermiston, we have a couple hundred Dhcp Scopes. I wasn't going to go type all of these out. So what I did was, again, just using the idea of, hey, if I can automate the documentation from the live system, how much more powerful is that? Because going back to the first premise, if you document it, you have to maintain it. How about if you could just auto-maintain your documentation? Anybody else want to leave? I don't know. I got people walking out on me. It always makes me nervous, like I'm sucking or something. So where's, you know, how much power is there to auto-document your systems? I mean, obviously that's what we would all want our documentation to be able to do. Go read what the system is and then document it for us. So with SharePoint, I took that idea that I saw in IT Glue and then built this. So all of these were populated, again, just with a PowerShell script to automatically read our Active Directory environment, bring in all the DHCP scopes, the DHCP servers, the domains, the domain records, not IPs yet. Networks, I don't remember if I did that as an automated system. No. So I didn't do that, but so DHCP servers, as our environment changed, this would automatically update. So if we added a new domain controller and put DHCP or DNS services on it, the PowerShell script capability would maintain this and keep it updated. So if for any reason we lost, so there's all of our domains. So again, I took this capability directly from the IT Glue. All you got to do is put the domain in, and the PowerShell script goes out, finds the registrar, and there's other items on here, but you can't see the columns.
So the trick is to get it to auto-update, but not so quickly that it auto-updates a mistake that's made so you don't know what it was before.
Well, SharePoint, everything in SharePoint is revision controlled, right? So that's one of the, for me, that's one of the benefits. So if you go look at a new item, I just never updated the view. So all you have to do is put in domain name. It'll figure out who the registrar is. It'll figure out the expiration date of the domain, the who is information, and then this is notes, so you can just add your own notes. So this kind of giving you an idea of what I was looking for in documentation system was, you know, one, flexibility, two, automation, because if you document it, you have to maintain it. So one of the ones that was really important for me is the Dhcp Scopes. So if we go back here and click on one, and I learned this one from real life experience. So if that will load. Maybe? Is it working? No. Yeah, it's working. Ish. Maybe? Come on. I'm not going to click because I always tell my users, stop clicking, give it time. So I don't want to be one of them. So hopefully this will load, but the nice thing about the Dhcp scopes, how many of you have ever had one of your Dhcp scopes accidentally deleted? Hopefully I don't see a whole bunch of hands. We had in Hermiston, we had our high school Dhcp scope deleted. Middle of the day, middle of the school day, deleted. And we found out, or I found out, because help desk tickets started to come in, duplicate IP address detected. Because everything started renegotiating the IP and they started overlapping each other. So reservations, if you work with or around me, I'm a big fan of creating DHCP reservations. How many of you have ever had to re-IP your network? I should see a heck of a lot more hands. How many of you have had to re-IP all of your devices because you re-IP'd your network? You don't have to do that. If you create your reservations, you can change your IP addresses on your network as much as you want, and you don't have to touch a single device, generally. So I learned that working for the ESD because we were going through a lot of different growth spurts and needed to I think 3 times while I was there at the ESD, we changed our IP, and I was one of the ones that had to go through and update all the printers, and it just got to be a pain. So I'm a big fan of reservations. If you delete your DHCP scope, how do you recreate those reservations? How do you know what they were to begin with? So again, I didn't hand do this. I just created a little PowerShell script to load up the DHCP PowerShell commandlet module and just pulled it right in to SharePoint. At this rate, I'm not going to have anybody here by the time I'm done, but that's okay. So anyways, that's to answer your question, yes, but not yet. So remember I said in IT Glue, you can program to these right now. They are still working on providing the REST API for the flexible assets. As soon as they do, since we do have the skill set in-house to build the scripting behind it, we can automate probably 50% of our infrastructure documentation just with a simple PowerShell script to just go through and define all the different assets using PowerShell because it can talk to all the different environments. Really powerful language nowadays. So that was a really good point. So again, going through flexible assets, and this is pretty much built from scratch. Some of the information that I wanted to know about it. Now I'm not updating my window, or am I? Yeah, yeah. So, our functional levels. Yes, they're not 2012 or 2016. Don't judge me. DNS servers, again, just creating that association to what are the DNS. Just because a domain controller is a domain controller doesn't mean that it's necessarily what you're publishing as your DNS server out to your clients. We have 6 domain controllers, but we only have 4 DNS servers. So that's why in my environment it made sense to create that as a separate documentation item, whereas in Hermiston it wouldn't even include to me because my domain controllers were my DC or my DNS servers, so I wouldn't have done it separately. But again, if we keep scrolling down, DHCP, and then who's ever had to seize their FSMO roles? So who can always remember the commands? There's like 5, 6 different ways to learn who those FSMO roles are. What are the 5 tools? Anybody? Interactive. What are some of the tools? DC Promo will not tell you your FSMO roles. There's NTDS util. You can do it through one of the net commands. I don't remember exactly what it is, but using the net.exe, you can get it through there. You can go through the GUI tools, domains and trusts, users and computers, sites and services, and schema. But, you know, so just having these documented, and even these, once I can program against the flexible assets, I can make it so that these are 100% dynamic. So that if for some reason we sent, you know, we wanted to split up our FSMA roles, it would automatically read the environment and populate these. And if anybody, if it ever gets to that point and this is a product you want to look at, just pick up the phone and call. I'm more than happy to share any scripting work that we do on this stuff. So again, Dhcp Scopes, you just saw what I built in SharePoint. Very similar. Actually, it's a little more structured. So name of the scope, start range, end range, subnet mask, all of that can be fully automated. So I don't have to manage it at all. Reservations, just go into a little HTML table, and I don't have any related items there. So I don't know if I need to go into a whole lot. So similar to the domains is this SSL certificate thing. So if you look at this, it's got all the information for the domain. All I had to do in ITGlue was put in the name of my domain. It went out to the website, made a query to the website, grabbed the SSL certificate, and read the public key information inside the certificate, and then documented it automatically. So again, the domains can do that, and then the SSL certificates can do that as well. And in this case, I think, I don't have it there, but I thought I did. Maybe I don't. Yes, I do. So there it is. So I also added an attachment that is my SSL certificate, the public and private key combination. It is password protected, and the password is not in this. It's in a separate system. So it's still secure, generally. But again, that's documentation. If you ever lose your publics, if you've ever built an SSL certificate for a web server and you didn't keep an exported version with your private key, that certificate is useless on anything but that one single physical server. So it's important that when you use your SSL certificates, you're exporting one with the public and private key in it. So we just keep them stored here. That's not automated, but tracking all the information and possibly even the expiration. Let me see if that's down there. Is that top? There you go. So, and then this field, ITGlue has the concept of expiration date field. So that's one of the custom attributes that you can define as an expiration date. And what that does in ITGlue, it allows you to send yourself notifications on a time interval that you define. That way, licensing. If a license is about to expire. For me, I want to know a couple months in advance, so I make sure that I, don't spend all the money before that, because it comes up in, June 15th, it's due, and by June 1st, I've already tried to empty out the coffer, so to speak. So getting these notifications earlier is a benefit for me, so that I can do proper budgeting. But your SSL, your domains, you can have that so you get an alert automatically that, hey, your domain is up for renewal in X number of months or weeks or whatever. Let's create a new flexible asset. So I'm going to go into the back end, into flexible assets. Going to create a new one. What's something that you document regularly? Just throw something out. Anybody?
We don't document regularly, that's what we're here.
It's always so hard to think on the fly. Huh?
Domain registration.
Is that different from domains?
Oh, sure.
Okay, we can do it this way. It's fine. You can pick an icon, glass, provide a description, blah, blah, blah. And then here's where, for me, here's where the real power is in this particular system. What are some of the attributes that we want to track for a domain registration? Probably the domain name. You can have it as a hint, enter the full domain name, blah, 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 and then what kind of field. In this case, it's text, but there's the different options. So you can make it a checkbox, a date field, a header, which is just an organizational aspect, a number, a select box where you can enter choices. You can say, you can select from these 5 items. Text box, so text box, you can do rich HTML in it. Upload a file. Tags, so that's the association capability that I talked about. You can throw in a password and then a percentage. So in this case, text, new field. What else? Probably purchase date. And in that case, I want it to be a date. So you can see there that you have the choice of expiration. For purchase date, I don't need that to be expiration. But let's say we also want the expiration date. I can also make that a date field, define it as expiration. And let's say that I wanted the display name of this domain to be the domain name. And maybe for simplicity, I also want to see the expiration date. So I'm not going to go through, but hopefully you can see some of the power in defining your assets and what attributes, what metadata you want to associate with that.
Are tags limited to a certain kind?
So let's look at that.
To tag related IP addresses or related or anything?
So let me fill in here. So if we go into tag, so it does have you select what type of tag to search for. So that's when you're embedding it in as an attribute of a flexible asset. The lookup tag that's on the right side of all the assets searches across the whole thing. So we'll go ahead and save organization. So what organization is it in SSL for? So now we did domain registration. We can go in there. First thing you'll see, well, you won't see anything because I got to create one. Oh, got to go back. So here's one of the things that's inconvenient. If you're just using it as a single organization, when you go into organizations, plural, you have to always select your organization. So that's something that's not ideal. Then we can come down here to, not going to be on there, is it? So it's a custom sidebar. So what do we call it?
Bottom right, lower down.
So I can drag it over to the sidebar, click save, go back to my organizations, click on my organization, and then there you go. And you can order where that is in the list. So if you're going to domain registration, add one, domain name, Salkais, purchase date, and that's not going to work because they want you to do these funky dates. They are working on that.
Not funky, right.
If you're a MySQL programmer, you're right. If you're human, no, it's not right.
Well, it depends on which continent you're from.
True. But if anything, just put a date picker there. All right, so purchase date, expiration date. So organization, let's say it belongs to Microsoft. And then save. All right, so remember I said, what? Oh, it is dashes, damn it. See, that's the problem with working with a Canadian company.
Dashes are extraneous, I wouldn't even bother.
All right. So, a few things to know. One, you can see it created successfully. Two, you can see it added the expiration date into the title. So if you have a bunch of items, you can expose that in the name. The different fields that you put in, you can see that here I'm on the item, but the expiration date automatically flagged because it's within a month, which is the default time frame. You can see that the tag for the organization, I could click on that, go right to the organization. All right, I'm on a roll here. 10 down, 50 to go. Let's see how fast I can get you cleared out of here. Let's look at a related item. So let's say I didn't have this tag, and I just wanted to associate an organization. So I could just start typing, and you can see in this case, maybe, you can see the different items. So in this case, I have Microsoft as an organization, I have Microsoft as a site, and then it probably pulled up this folder here because it has Microsoft in the title. So the search on this is actually pretty impressive, and I can give you a quick demo of that, so I'm going to do the same thing. So as you're typing, it's searching the whole database. Pretty much everything that you put in here is indexed as soon as you create it. So when you start searching, it pulls up everything that has what you're searching for. So it's actually pretty powerful, and it makes navigation a lot easier. So let me finish this selection. So we'll select the organization, click Save. So now you can see that it's associated here. And if I go to Microsoft, the organization, now it's going to make a liar of me. So let me... Organization probably wasn't the best one because that took me into a different organization, and even though you can link them, you can't obviously associate data between your different clients. So that was a bad example. So what's time look like? When does this one end? Anybody? Huh? What time does it end? 2? All right. 20 minutes left. Let's talk about documents. So documents in IT Glue are a little different in that they're built into the product. So they're not attachments, they're not Word documents, they're not PDF documents, they're just HTML documents. So it does have a folder structure available to you, and you can manage and control that. So you can create a new folder, you can create subfolders. So let's go into applications. So a document is just an item in this folder structure. And when I click on it, it'll load into the document editor as a read document. You can edit, and pretty much they got a few quick editor items. So you can add a heading, a text, a step. So that's, step 1, step 2, step 3 if you're building instructions. So I just want to add a text box, and there you can see it's a rich text editor, and you can format your documentation however you want. What it doesn't have is a way to export it or create it as a document. If you want to pull this out, you got to copy and paste. What happens when you copy and paste text with images? You lose your images. Can't currently copy and paste images out of here. They are working on a export to either Word or PDF, and that's an active development right now. So that'll be good because right now, once you put it in here, really hard to get it back out.
Can you link external documents into the application? Document from a SharePoint library or a file system in here and use this database. Search them and relate objects to them.
Yeah. So there isn't a link type, but there's no reason why you couldn't create a link type and just build all of those. But then you're doubling your work because you got to create it as a link asset type and then go into the core asset and associate it to that. So it's kind of doubling the work. You could add it for a document here. You could just add it as a link inside of the document, and it would be a clickable link. So if I pasted a link in here, it would be a clickable link. If you wanted to associate a Word document with this, you could just drag and drop here, and it'll add it as an attachment onto there. Again, password-related items, you'll see all of those are pretty standard. Let's go to the bottom of this, maybe, not the bottom. All right, so you can see you do have revision control on the document, so as you edit it over time, it's not a perfect system. There is I think, a limit to the number of revisions it keeps. You can associate sub-documents, so if it's a multi-step thing and you wanted it, to be separate documents but still associated, so that's a different type of association. You can define this security, so everything in here, it's group-based. So anything that you put in here, you have the choice to make it so that anybody that can log in can access your document, or you can start breaking it down to different groups. And if you select the group, or select the option to restrict, you can see that you have just a selection of groups and users. So let's say this was a super secret business intelligence documentation, and I only want that team to have access to it. I could filter it down to that group. And those groups are whatever you define them to be. So pretty flexible in that, super simple, but pretty flexible in that. Any questions so far?
As you structure this, are you thinking of moving away from SharePoint then?
Yes. So I started building in SharePoint, and I built all this cool automation, and then I just got frustrated and said, screw it, and started looking deeper into IT Glue. Remember, originally I came across it because I was just looking for information. What could help me build this awesome, cool system in SharePoint? But then when it came time to, so I built all the different lists that are in SharePoint. So, DCP Scopes, servers, the different types of systems, contacts, expirations. So, I built all this stuff, then it's like, okay, how do I train my people to use it? So I wanted to create, I can kind of show you if this will load. So when it came time to build a front end, to provide the navigation so that they just didn't have to go into all of the different, should be in site pages. And let's try this one. Could be the wrong one. Yep, that's not the right one. So let's go into systems. All right, so started to build a page, started to add all my different web parts, and then started to try to filter them. So if I selected Web Help Desk, the devices that are associated with that should filter down the list. The IP addresses that are associated should filter down. And it just doesn't work because I needed multiple levels. And with SharePoint, you can't filter multiple levels. Or there's not a multi-item filter capability. So I spent probably a day trying to get this functional, and then just said screw it and started digging deeper into IT Glue. So I could make this work, but it wasn't working the way that I wanted to, and I was really concerned about just trying to get, if you're going to implement documentation into your culture, you got to have a tool that's going to be easy to use. Otherwise, you will never be successful, in my opinion, in implementing that into your culture, and that's what you have to do. You have to be able to build it into the culture of your staff.
Yeah, it was a product you put a lot of time into implementing. What factors choice as a stable company? I mean, what swayed you to do certain things?
Right?
And how many information systems have we gone through? You know, it's like, yeah, they could get bought out, which might not be a bad thing. But it's just, yes, it's a gamble, but it's a time gamble as well as money.
Right.
So, what swayed you? We went export capability more than this. Yes, export capability.
Right.
That's our way out.
So it does have export capability. It's not something you would ever want to have to use, to be perfectly honest with you. It just puts it all out as one zip file. You have to figure it out and parse through it. Inside that zip file are Excel spreadsheets. So for your configuration items, a lot of your flexible assets, you know, that's structured data. So it's easy to throw it into a CSV file and then regain that and import it into something else. So it's not all lost. The part that really, really sucks is since the documents, and here's Eric Shamlin in the room. No. So that was he's one of my programmers, and he was like, can I get a login so I can test the export capability? So he exported, started analyzing it. So if you put pictures into your documents, those don't export back out, period. I'm sure as they provide the export to Word or export to PDF, they'll integrate that into the export function as a whole. So like I said, I'm not saying that this is a mature product. It's a maturing product. Before I bought it, I spent a week reading through all of the feature requests. So they kind of do a user voice type thing where you vote up and you see them responding and releasing features to the community that's voting them up. So it is an active company. It's a growing company. Again, I did a lot of research and testing and playing in here. I actually have another account that is much more populated with real data that I used for about a month before I made a decision. So OETC, Thomas isn't in here, so don't get mad at me. OETC can help you purchase this. It's 34, 36, 30, I want to say 34 a user, $34 a user, so, and it's your technicians.
They have 39 on their website. It's just
Right, so 39 is what I paid for my demo account. I just pulled out the credit card. But then working through Thomas, buying 80 licenses, he was able to get them down to 34. And even for a big shop, that's not a small purchase, and that's $34 per month.
plus $4.95 person upfront fee.
Yes. So, again, not cheap, but either is losing all the information that we should probably have documented, right? So for me, it balanced out from ease of use, from flexibility to configure it to meet our needs. This was the best product that I could find at the time. And like I said, it's not the perfect product, but it is a good functional product that will expand and get better as it goes.
But since you're phasing, if you phase into this and phase out of SharePoint, are you also saving in that you don't have to spend time as a SharePoint administrator, hire a SharePoint administrator, blah, blah, blah?
Again, we don't have documentation in SharePoint. I tried to build a system in SharePoint to solve our documentation problem.
In our case, someone
Sure.
that has utilized SharePoint for a long time, we have a SharePoint administrator, blah, 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 that could, balance out.
If you're dropping SharePoint completely, maybe. But if you're still going to manage SharePoint, you're still going to be paying that full FTE on the SharePoint administration side. So.
I do appreciate piggybacking on what your research because we trust your opinions.
Right.
But and there's some things that may not be ready for our use now, but who knows? Things change.
Yeah, like I said, when I came across it, again, if you go back to the first question I asked, who's got documentation solved? I don't remember seeing a single hand go up. It's a challenge, and I believe maybe in 2 years, I'll come back and show you what we've done. Hopefully we're still using the product, but if not, and just show you what can be done with the size of Salem Kaiser and the number of things that we have to document, even though we all do very similar work, the scope of our work is different, is what I've learned at a larger school district. There is just a ton more things that we do because there's a ton more decision makers, basically.
Can I ask what the other products that you looked at were?
There's one called SI Portal. SI Portal. I ran across others, looked at them, but they didn't have any way for me to do a simple demo account. So I just bypassed them. I passed SI Portal. At home, I'm a heavy iPad user because I like to be mobile and spend as much time with my family as I can because I don't get to spend a lot of time with them. So I stay on my iPad, and it wouldn't load on the iPad. They had a demo site, and it wouldn't load on the iPad, so I immediately rolled them out. But I hear they're not a bad product. But again, if you can't work on an iPad in today's day and age, you're not a product that I would invest in.
Do you have any concerns with this being a Canadian company, and I'm assuming that the data is stored in Canada?
They have multiple, not a data warehouse, multiple data centers. So am I concerned about Canada? No, because they know they'd be screwed without us. I've lived there, I can talk like that. So if anybody's Canadian, don't take it personally, I've lived there. Yeah.
Do you see this as a place where you could do service level documentation, like with ITIL services?
Absolutely.
Expectations and, okay.
Yep. You can create public documents. So if I heard somebody talking yesterday about service catalog. So if you had a help desk system, for instance, and they were asking, hey, what do I do for this? You can create a public document and give out a public link to it so that they can just go there. Remember, this is cloud-based. There is no on-prem option. So you could give a URL that anybody in the world could use and go access that document without logging in. Because remember, you're only paying for your technicians the ability to document. That's what you're paying for. But even in Hermiston, at $34, even $39 a month, I would have probably made the same decision to invest for the 4 technicians that are out there.
Did they indicate anywhere whose data centers they're using? Amazon, Microsoft, their own?
No. They'll probably give you that information, but I didn't ask.
Start looking at tracing the routes.
Right.
Sometimes you find it.
Yeah.
You said you would from 79 for 75.
79.
And your licensing is for 100% of that team, or just for the folks doing certain roles?
I have 100 licenses. Yeah, I can see scenarios where I may want to invite other partners in the district into the documentation environment so they have access to the information. Obviously, I'd have to then security filter things, so it changes my security structure. I believe you can set a default security group. So the default is TIS, but then if I want to bring others in, director of custodial or facilities or something like that, I can bring them in and just they'll see what I've allowed them to see. So I ordered a few more licenses than I need planning for the capability to collaborate like that.
So your groups and security is all built in
Correct. Because this is completely off-prem, and I may have just killed my presentation. Let's see if it can recognize me better right now. No. Well, I'm plugged in. It's all on, but I lost my keyboard. I don't know. My guess is standard web practice applies. If you got two people changing things at the same time, the last one wins, would be my guess. You can even do that in SharePoint. So save early, save often. That's a rule to live by. All right. How are we looking at time? 6 minutes? Anybody got 6 minutes worth of questions on documentation? Was this useful? Yeah. Like I said, I'm not pitching the product. If it doesn't work for you, do something else. But I'm pretty picky on my selection of stuff. Anybody that's sent me a quote to purchase things for them knows that. It's like, what's this? No, that's a piece of shit. No, we're not going to buy that. I'm kind of OCD like that. Every dollar that goes out of my IT department runs through me. So got to make sure we do our research and be responsible with those funds. But like I said, early, but I can see the promise in it. So I'm really hopeful. But without a doubt, I don't have any guarantees that it's going to be an awesome product.
What are you guys using for asset tracking?
Mark, what are we using for asset tracking?
That's a great question.
Okay then.
What aren't you using?
Right.
Yeah.
What do you define as an asset?
Yeah.
So you guys aren't keeping track of serial numbers?
We don't have enough time for crap like that. So, remember, number one rule at ACP is what? What's said here stays here. So coming into Salem, we were tracking and putting asset tags on every single thing that we purchased. And Big Bad Bob just said, no, we're not doing that anymore. So now we don't tag anything, and we don't give a crap. Or I don't give a crap, and until I lose my job, I'm okay with that. There's a lot of things that are good ideas to do. It's just a balance of time and money, right?
We tag big items. Switches and servers.
Right. As part of our purchasing process, but not as part of technology's process. So capital expenditures get tagged as part of the bigger district process, but we have systems. All of my Chromebooks are in Google Console. All of my PCs are in SCCM and Active Directory. If I need to find the information, I can. It may take a little more work on the back side, but for me, that's worth it because since I've been there 2.5 years, haven't needed to track one down yet. And it was taking us, and after we got in, bought the 14,000 Chromebooks, can you imagine how much additional time it's going to take to peel those labels, stick it on, roll it on. It wasn't practical, and there's not enough value in it for me. So I'm not saying that everybody should stop asset tracking. If you find value, great, do it. But for me, there's not enough value in it, and we're not going to do the inventory every year. We're not going to, if we're not going to build the systems around it to ensure that it's 100% robust, then don't do it at all. And that's just my philosophy. So don't go back and say, Bob said we don't have to do this stuff.
Where's this recording going to be, Bob?
Well, I might have a little influence over that.
It's not recording.
Yeah.
Oh, no, the camera went.
No. Anything else?
So just to work off that, so do you have a standardization of naming conventions for your devices?
Now, yes. So I'm building foundations. We're getting to the point where the documentation is the next step in the journey that I'll say that we're on. But the naming standards is one of the first things that we implemented, because that's where it all starts. You got to be able to find and locate your devices and look at the name and know where it's at. So you saw with the projector, DP, data projector, display projector, whatever you want to call it. PRIN, with 80 different sites or locations, we couldn't find an unambiguous name to do. So in Hermiston, we had HHS, Hermiston High School, DVES, Desert View Elementary School. In Salem, we had too many, so they were ambiguous names, but the one scheme that did work for us was the first 4 letters. So in our case, that was unambiguous and worked. If you've worked there long enough, you can identify what PRIN is. It's Pringle Elementary School. But the first 4 are unique for each site, so that's the next step. Individual site-based locations. So that's the aggregate macro level. You know, it's at Pringle Elementary School. Where's it at in Pringle Elementary School? 015. It's room 15. EPS is Epson. So I can look at the name and tell what it is, where it's at, and how to support it if I need to.
So how does so if the user is reporting a problem with that vector, how do they identify it back to you guys?
I'm in Pringle Elementary School, room 15.
Okay.
Eventually, right now, if they use the help desk system, we can automatically identify they're at Pringle. Here in another year or so, we should be able to even track them down to the room number by partnering with the schools to update probably a SharePoint list with, here's all my teachers, here's the room numbers they're in, and then we'll integrate that into our account provisioning process. That way in the help desk system, as soon as you log in, I know you're Pringle and I know you're in room 15. So if you say I have a data...
You don't want to update that in SharePoint, pull it forward to the information system. That's where I pull it.
Okay. Good idea. Pull it from your SIS. So in Hermiston, it's easy there because HR creates all the accounts. So they just go into SharePoint, put the information in as soon as they hire or fire. PowerShell script comes along, does what it has to do in Active Directory, updates everything else. And then the OMs at the beginning of the year, here's your staff list, go in, update it. So it's a refined process, but yeah, SIS for Salem probably is a much better option. I didn't think of that. Awesome. And I believe we're out of time, so thank you all for coming. Hopefully you find some value in this. And I believe I'm staying here, right? Hey, Darren? Darren. Can you find me a... Well, never mind, I'll do it. Thanks. Appreciate the help.
We're so small, we have to do things.